a Ghost Rider gets killed off, and that's okay. All right, so Absolute Carnage has been a pretty crazy event. Thing I love about events, though, is that some people end up getting killed off, and when you consider this day and age, I think sometimes that's a good thing, depending on who it is and how they go about it. But Absolute Carnage, if you haven't been reading, it deals with Carnage wreaking havoc yet again. They're going by, and Carnage and his crew of little mini Carnages are going around trying to grab the codexes out of people that formerly held or were taken over, let's say, by a symbiote. So if you had a symbiote take you, then you have that codex in you, and that's what they're going. They're going person to person to try to sort of extract those codexes. So from those characters that have had them. So you can just think about, in the long history of Marvel, and the long history of people that have had or been possessed, even if briefly, by symbiotes. Possessed is probably not the proper term for it, but have had symbiotes be a part of their being. You can, and that's the cool thing about it, is that it's going over that sort of long history. Even that I can't remember if it was an accountant, was it, that got it right before Spider-Man did. They even came back to that. And to me, as a guy that really cares about history and legacy and obviously going back and acknowledging events that happened, seeing some of this and me remembering, oh, didn't so-and-so have the symbiote at one point in time? And they're kind of going by that, I think is a very cool thing about this event. So I have a more positive outlook than I had before. I still think that this event is a little too early because we just ended with the War of the Realms. But considering some of the things that are happening, I do sort of, I'm liking it in a sense. But coming out of this, and this takes place, this is Absolute Carnage, Symbiote of Carnage. This actually takes place before, though it came out after. This takes place before Absolute Carnage issue #1. So, you know, with events, they have to have 65 million different sort of side things that they have going on. This was one of them. And what Symbiote of Vengeance deals with is, you have Alejandra Jones. For those that don't know, she had, I believe, she was introduced, what, it was earlier, it wasn't that long ago, 2011 if I'm not mistaken. And she is a Ghost Rider. Now, right now, she's protecting this town in Nicaragua. She previously destroyed that town, and she's sort of protecting it, if you will. And Carnage shows up, says, hey, I think you got something for me. And again, takes place before Absolute Carnage. So it may be weird if you're reading it in that context, but it does take place before he's like, hey, you got something for me. And, oh man, it's like, how do I go through the history in such a short period of time? So the actual Ghost Rider, who you know as Ghost Rider, would be Johnny Blaze for the most part. Robbie Reyes has kind of been pushed to the forefront. He's part of the Avengers right now. And if you've watched like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's Robbie that actually shows up. So, but the one that people that have, you follow this, when you think Ghost Rider, you think Blaze. He's in hell right now. He's sort of taking the place of Mephisto in a sense. And he hasn't quite gotten an understanding of how to use, go back and forth between hell, how to send people back and forth. He hasn't quite got there yet. So he appears in sort of this ghost form to hit up Danny Ketch, who is another Ghost Rider. And he's like, Danny, I need you to go to Nicaragua to help her, which is Alejandra. She's in trouble. So it's like, they have a little skirmish, not a fight, obviously, but he's like, damn, I'm doing your dirty work here. So he goes there, and between that conflict, she gets killed. Alejandra, that is, gets killed by Carnage. So if you look at it in terms of a timeline, I guess she's one of the first bodies taken in terms of this whole, all right, we're going to get these codexes, and what popped off this whole Absolute Carnage thing. So she's one of the first ones to end up dying. And she's in hell. You know, she's linked. They make it sort of this reunion thing with her, and even though he's sad that he couldn't quite save her and Blaze, and he's like, all right, well, there's other Ghost Riders down here. I want to show you how this is done. Because remember, this is a short period of time. She hasn't even really understood what all she can do and what it means to be a Ghost Rider and such. Now, I'm okay with them killing her off for this reason. There's too many of them. I forgot that she was even alive. I forgot Danny was alive, considering that there's Robbie Reyes, too, who didn't have anything to do with this. So, and though Johnny does show up sort of in the Avengers talking to him. But the problem with that is the same issue that I have with Spider-Man, in that there's too many. Now, you can consider Hell an alternate universe in a sense. I think it's such a core of, it's not really what you think as an alternative like universe in the Marvel sense, because when you think that, you think like an entirely different reality that has some of the same characters that exist there doing different things. That's not necessarily what this is. It works in combination with the main universe, if you will. So it is, Hell is part of the main universe in that context. So if they're going to exist and they're there, that's one thing. They don't really exist. She's in Hell. She's not going to be mingling a whole lot, though, if you consider Mephisto and some of his history. Yes, that they sort of go hand in hand. But I would rather her be there as opposed to her being on Earth alive with other Ghost Riders. Now, when you deal with alternative universe, and the points that I was going to make is that sometimes they deal with them crossing over. And again, this is why Hell isn't necessarily one. But, you know, you've seen what happened with Spider-Man and Ghost Spider, what they're calling her now, as well as Miles Morales, in which they exist in different realities and different universes. And then, of course, they always bring them into the main universe. So now we have 16 Spider-Man right now. When you consider her, you consider Miles Morales, you consider Spider-Woman, you consider all these different Spider versions of, it's just versions of Peter Parker. And you could make a case to why that was necessary back in the day, when you had a bunch of versions of different characters, tokenized versions of characters that were just female copies of previously established characters, or characters that was so much like the other ones. They may have gone by different names, but they're like, War Machine, as an example, who was Iron Man before he was even War Machine, but that's all he exists as. Now he's just a version of Iron Man. So understanding that, back in the Gap, didn't have different promotional schemes. I could understand why you would do that to bring in a new character. But now it's no excuse in Marvel's sense, especially when you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You have people that are paying attention to it. Now, we can argue that comics are in a decline, and some of that is because these comic book writers are lazy and some of them are no good. Let's just be 100 about the situation. Some of them are lazy, some of them are no good, or a lot of them are. And that's more so attributed to the decline, or attributes to the decline. But nowadays, I figure there's no excuse not to come up with new, fresh characters. There's no reason to have all these copies running around. There's just too much talent out there that I believe that needs to that they should be the ones getting the shot. And there's just too many different promotional schemes with social media that can be utilized. So there's no reason to try to piggyback solely off a popular character. That's lazy. So them killing her off, to me, is good. Obviously, I had no connection to that character. I didn't care about the character like that. So I'm okay with that. Wish they'd do that with some of the Spider-Man. Just create new, fresher characters. And that's okay. That's okay to kill some of these characters off. Certainly when you consider how many Ghost Riders there are, man. Hell, you even got Punisher, who is a cosmic Ghost Rider now. Just way too many Ghost Riders. We don't need all those characters, floating around. So I don't have no problem with them killing her off. I hope that they do it to more characters, because we need some fresher ones. We don't need all these characters that are just piggybacking off of other characters, female copies of other characters. We don't need that. Have no issue with them killing her off. Hope they do it for more characters such as Spider-Man, which they probably won't, but I would encourage them to do that. It's just not an excuse. You're being lazy. There's just too much social media out there. You can, at a click of a button, you can bring attraction to this character if they sound interesting. Just do it that way. Create them new, create them fresh.